Right now, you're moving. Not walking, not driving. You're spinning at about 1,000 miles an hour just from the Earth's rotation, while also hurtling through space around the Sun at roughly 67,000 miles an hour. You feel none of it. And for most of human history, that wasn't just a coincidence. It was the entire reason nobody believed the Earth moved at all. Stand outside and look up. The sun rises, crosses the sky, and sets. The stars wheel slowly overhead through the night. Every single piece of evidence your own eyes give you says one thing clearly. You're standing still, and the universe is moving around you. This wasn't stupidity. It was the most logical conclusion a person could reach using only direct observation. And for over 1,000 years, one man's version of that idea became the accepted truth across most of the civilized world. Around 150 AD, a Greek astronomer named Ptolemy, working in Egypt, compiled centuries of observation into a single mathematical model. Earth sat at the center. The sun, moon, and planets all orbited around it in perfect circles. There was one enormous problem with this. Planets don't actually move in smooth circles across the sky. Sometimes, Mars, for example, appears to slow down, stop, and drift backward before continuing forward again. Ptolemy's solution was to add smaller circles riding on top of the bigger ones, called epicycles, tiny loops within loops that could mathematically explain that backward motion. It was complicated, it required constant patchwork, but it worked well enough to predict the sky accurately for well over 1,000 years. That system held for so long partly because it matched what people saw, and partly because it matched what people believed. Ancient philosophy, and later medieval Christian theology, placed Earth and humanity at the physical and spiritual center of creation. Challenging the model wasn't just a scientific problem, it was a theological one. Then, in 1543, a Polish astronomer named Nicholas Copernicus published a book he had actually been sitting on for decades, reportedly out of fear of backlash. His argument was radical in its simplicity. What if the sun, not the Earth, sat at the center? Suddenly, that strange backward motion of Mars made sense without needing dozens of patchwork circles. If Earth itself was moving and simply passing Mars in its orbit, the backward drift was just an illusion created by our own changing viewpoint, the same way a slower car appears to move backward when you overtake it on a highway. It was elegant. It was also, at the time, almost impossible to prove. Copernicus had no telescope. He was working entirely from mathematics and geometry, and his model still wasn't perfectly accurate since he assumed the planets moved in perfect circles instead of the ellipses we now know are correct. But the core idea, that Earth was not the fixed center of everything, had been put back on the table after more than 1,000 years. The real turning point came in 1609, when an Italian scientist named Galileo Galilei pointed a newly improved telescope at the sky. What he found was hard to argue with. Jupiter had its own moons, tiny points of light visibly orbiting around it, proof that not everything in the universe circled the Earth. Venus went through phases, just like our moon, something that only made sense if Venus orbited the sun. The evidence was no longer just theoretical, it was observable, through a lens, by anyone willing to look. That evidence put Galileo in direct conflict with the Catholic Church. In 1633, he was placed on trial, forced to publicly recant his support for a sun-centered universe, and spent the rest of his life under house arrest. The physical evidence was mounting, but power and tradition weren't ready to let go. The final mathematical proof came decades later, from an English scientist named Isaac Newton. In 1687, Newton published his law of universal gravitation, explaining precisely why planets orbit the sun in the first place, an invisible force pulling every object toward every other object based on their mass and distance. It wasn't just that the Earth orbited the sun. Newton explained the actual physics behind why it had to. So here's the full picture. For over 1,000 years, everyone agreed the Earth stood still, because that's exactly what it feels like standing on it. It took a mathematician willing to publish a heretical idea, a scientist willing to point a telescope at the sky and trust what he saw over what he was told to believe, and a physicist who could finally explain the invisible force holding the whole system together. Right now, as you sit reading this, you're spinning and orbiting through space at speeds that should be terrifying, and you'll never feel a thing. The ground under your feet has been lying to you since the day you were born. It just took humanity over 1,000 years to catch the lie.